Hey horror fans, Boardnell back with you. On this review, I'm going to be talking about The Black Phone from 2022. This is a catch-up just because I've never covered it on the channel before. I did see it when it came out at the cinemas a few years ago, just never got around to doing it on the channel, and it makes sense to do it now since The Black Phone 2 is coming out in October, and I plan on covering that next month on the channel. So bit of a recap of the original movie. As many of you know, it is adapted from a Joe Hill collection of short stories, which I'm reading for the first time now. I've been doing some special readings on live streams. I haven't got to The Black Phone yet, the actual title story, so I'm not quite sure how this compares with that. The setup is that it's set in the late 70s in Denver, and you've got two kids, Finn and Gwen, who recently lost their mother over the last year or so, and they've been left with their alcoholic and abusive dad, played by Jeremy Davis. They both get bullied at school, and all this takes place to the backdrop of this local serial killer, the Grabber, played by Ethan Hawke for a lot of the movie under a mask, who's been kidnapping local teenagers, and at one point in the film he kidnaps Finn, and that becomes then the meat of the movie. Finn trapped in his basement. The Black Phone of the title is because he seems to talk to the previous victims of the Grabber on the Black Phone in the basement, and through this he starts to come up with a strategy to escape the Grabber. At the time when I first saw this, I quite liked it. I thought it was very solid. It's directed by Scott Derrickson, who I'm not a massive fan of. Like, a lot of his films don't really blow me away. Most of them that I've seen have been mediocre, maybe even a bit worse than that. So I would say from the films of his that I have seen, The Black Phone is the best one so far. I wasn't as positive on a rewatch when I watched it tonight. I still quite like it. I still think it's solid enough, but some of the flaws were starting to stand out a little bit more on the rewatch this time around. And again, I haven't gotten to the short story yet, so I can't really compare that and how it stacks up against that. Because of like the nihilistic tone of some of the other stories in the collection, I should say, sorry, I'm wondering if maybe it does feel quite true to the story, but until I get to that I can't really comment. I think the cast are pretty strong. I quite like the chemistry between the brother and the sister, and they do feel like quite relatable teens and quite naturalistic. And I think Ethan Hawke is a good villain. Like, he's very menacing the way he delivers lines, and he's obviously an actor who's got a presence. Now, the more you see of him in the movie and the more things start to take place in the basement, the less of a threat he becomes. He feels less menacing as that stuff goes on. And some of the stuff with him, and also just some of the stuff happening in the basement with Finn, does get a little bit cheesy as it goes on, because as they start to get into some of the more maybe supernatural moments, or maybe just things appearing to Finn and certain effects being used, I think that's when the film really starts to fall down and it takes me a little bit out of it. And maybe that's an advantage the book has got on it, because with the book, a lot less can be left to the imagination, or a lot more, I should say, and you maybe get a little bit more subtlety, and kind of like it's described in a certain way which isn't perhaps hitting you over the head. But I did think some of that stuff came off a little bit cheesy at times. So I think the Grabber is a good villain overall, and I think Hawke is doing a good job. It does make sense as his career has gone on. He has started playing kind of more sinister, more douchey type characters. And I think he's quite affected at that. It's just less is more in many ways. And I think the more you see of him, the less threatening he becomes. But to be fair, it is part of the thing of the film. Then you pretty much know what's going on when it comes to him, when it comes to, okay, it's this guy who's kidnapped him and he's just behind the mask a lot of the movie. He kidnapped the previous kids. You know, there's not a lot of mystery to that stuff. So the fact that you see a lot of him maybe isn't like a massive problem. It's just the more you do see him, the less threatening he gets, in my opinion, and the more kind of hammy he gets, and it does maybe lose a little bit of the luster. But the setup is very solid. I really like the period stuff. Like it does have that very gritty, as I said, nihilistic 70s feel. The soundtrack is effective, like it really tunes you into the sounds of the times. And a lot of the teenage stuff is very solid and grounded, and it feels like a very natural depiction of teenage life, up and coming. My complaint with that stuff is probably that it is a bit too exaggerated at times. Like it's a bit too much in your face how douchey these teens are, and just how much of assholes they are, how much they're heightened when it comes to being bullies, and just how miserable everyone is. Because, as I said, the father, played by Jeremy Davis, who I was saying when I was watching it on stream, I like Jeremy Davis, but he does mumble sometimes in certain roles, and this is definitely one of them. So, although I could see what they were doing and I could appreciate that it was quite well done and probably quite true to life, I think they did go a little bit OTT with some of it, where some of it came off as a bit too cartoony. There's quite a melodramatic fight with Jeremy Davis's character and his daughter Gwen at one point. So some of that could have been toned down. I think some of Gwen's stuff, could have been toned down. Like at times, because they set up early in the film, then she's having nightmares and that she's going through stuff, and it leads to her talking very like aggressively towards her teachers and swearing a lot. And we get this almost subversion where she is the one who is like the more aggressive, the more independent, the tougher one. Whereas Finn is the more, he's still finding his way, he's still very awkward and shy. Because there is this whole thing of how Gwen like stands up to the bullies at one point, whereas Finn's almost just taking the punishment. Gwen gets in on the action and like just defends his honour really. And is a lot more confident when it comes to that kind of thing. And I think that's very well done. And I do like the arc that Gwen has. Like, I think she does become quite likeable by the end of the movie and a little bit more of a rounded character. And I do like their chemistry. It's just, I think at times they could have toned down some of her stuff. Like, that was a bit OTT and melodramatic, and I think it just would have been nice to have had a bit of variety in the characters. I know there's a girl in Finn's class who he takes a little bit of a shine into, and she's a likeable character. She's definitely one of the more likeable of the teen characters. But the whole setup, I think, is mostly well done. You open with like a baseball game, and we see that Finn's on the losing end of things. And you kind of have like this bully character who's the one who hits like the winning throw, winning hit, whatever it was, and we kind of see how he's quite popular with the girls. And there's a nice transition where he's riding down the street and a few girls are looking at him, and then all of a sudden the Grabblers van pulls out in front of him, and that's leading to him being kidnapped. And they actually cut to credits after that, which is quite funny because that's almost a TV thing to do, where you have an opening bit and then you cut to the titles. You don't really see it that often in movies, so that was something a little bit different. But as I said, that was a nice like transition shot and a nice contrast where one moment this teen is kind of on top of the world and the next he's about to be kidnapped. So that's kind of quite an effective thing for the movie to do. And you do get a little bit of their lives and a little bit of the other teens before they get kidnapped, because there's this whole thing about, and again this goes towards making Finn quite empathetic as a character, because one of the first scenes is like one of the teens getting beaten up by this other teen, and it's revealed that he was the one who bullied Finn last year. And Gwen is saying, well, he sort of deserved it really because of what he did to you before. And Finn's like, well, no one deserved that. But then we see how he becomes friends with, I think it's Bruce, who's the one who's beating him up. And Bruce is almost justifying it as, hey, he had it coming, he was such a douche all the time. That kind of thing. And they're talking about horror movies or movies in general, like not Friday the 3rd, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Enter the Dragon. So these are perfect references for the time. When the Grabbler adopts Finn is really well done. Like, it's quite clever how he appears, and he's sort of posing as a magician, like says, hey, do you want to see a trick? And it's a way to get his confidence. Got all these balloons which he uses as a way to like get him into the van. So that was nicely done, and Ethan Hawke plays that scene well. But yeah, once you get into the basement, some of the stuff in the basement I like more than other stuff. I think one of the standout scenes in the basement is when he is talking to Bruce on the phone, and Bruce is giving him instructions and saying, hey, I didn't die for anything, for nothing. It'll be nothing if you don't do this. You have to fight back. And that's the thing, when he starts to talk to these different characters on the phone, that's because they have all been killed. And he's having this interaction with them. And it's debatable if it's all in his head, but it's symbolic and they are God. It was one of the best scenes, I think, where Bruce is giving him advice on the phone and he starts practicing swinging the phone because that's going to become like a weapon. And yeah, Bruce is giving him advice, he's swinging the phone. And that's kind of his big moment where he finally learns to fight back. So some of the stuff in the basement, like I said before, I'm not so keen on because you kind of have faces appearing to him. There's some quite cheesy dialogue. And at times you just see a little bit too much. There's a couple of telegraph scenes, like they kind of do the whole thing where, because it's revealed at one point then the Grabbler has a brother who lives nearby, and he's the one who's this quite paranoid parent, but he is thinks he has got the whole thing figured out about what's been happening to these kids, without knowing then it's his brother who's been taking them. And at one point he shows up and finds Finn in the basement, and he's saying things like, "It's okay, my brother's at work." But again, he's a very unhinged sort of character. Like, he's getting all excited and saying, "Hey, do you want to know how I figured this out?" That sort of scene, it's telegraphed, and he's then going to be killed. Ultimately, it's Finn taking back his independence, and he does fight back. And it's a really satisfying scene when he, quote unquote, kills the grabber. And I say that because we're now getting a sequel. Though I know in the sequel it seems to be going full on supernatural maybe, which is even more than this, so they're using that as the explanation, I think, for the grabber still being around. But yeah, the actual scene really lands well when Finn chokes him out with the phone and yeah, just wrenches back on the neck. It's quite sort of graphic, and it's quite satisfying to see that it's Finn who does it, and it's a good sort of gut-wrenching kill, pretty effective, and he finally escapes, and when they arrive they finally find the bodies of the other kids in the basement. So yeah, it's a very solid film. I still like it quite a lot, but it did go a little bit down on this viewing. Like, there was just certain things that were a bit too cartoony and in your face at times, but definitely a solid film and a solid adaptation, I would say, of the short story. So I'll go 6.5. Like, I'm not going to go too high, but definitely for a Scott Derrickson film, it is one of the more solid, and I quite like the characters. You've got a decent villain, and I also like the setting and the soundtrack. So 6.5 sounds about right to me for The Black Phone. And I should be covering the new movie in October. In fact, hopefully me and Madison are going to do The Black Phone 2 together on the channel, because I know she was planning on seeing it. So hopefully she'll join me for that review. But thanks for listening, guys. Let me know what you think of The Black Phone, and are you looking forward to the sequel? If you've read the short story, then let me know how the film compares. Look out for lots of reviews and other stuff coming in October. But thanks for listening. Take care. Keep watching horror movies. See you soon.
I'll be home in the morning.
Where are you going?
I'm staying over at Susie's tonight.
What's new? The flyer.
The papers call him the grabber.
I wish you wouldn't call him that.
You don't actually believe that story, do you? Because he can't hear you, and he doesn't really take kids that safe.
Oh, you goof. Well, isn't that just peachy keen?
You need some help?
You see that?
Yeah.
Would you hand me my hat? Yes, sir. I am a part-time magician.
Are those black balloons in there?
Would you like to see a magic trick?
I have an announcement to make. One of our students, Finney Blake, was abducted.
What if I could help the police find Finney?
Doesn't work. Not since I was a kid.
I'll scream. I'll scratch your face.
This face?
Daddy, I had a dream about him.
What happened in your dream?
He was taken.
By a man with black balloons?
Yes.
We never released those details.
Hello?
Don't hang up.
Who are you?
You know all our names?
You're getting out of here.
Please let the dreams be real.
See the wall in front of you? I tore a long cable loose from down there.
There's a combination lock on the inside of the storm door.
What's the combination?
it in the wall.
Hang up the phone! Now!
The tree, the door, the gate. I'd never seen it before except in my dream.
You don't have much time.
You're gonna use a weapon. You raise the phone, step back, and swing.
Look what you made me do.
Please hurry.
You remember what I told you?
Someday I should stand up for myself.